We are dealing with someone that was born a fugitive, dies an outlaw, confuses, confounds, and often hurts in some deep spiritual awakening form of way almost everybody that he met. He affected everybody that he met. And then he has the audacity of coming back. What kind of devilment got into the petri dish of Western consciousness that we managed to domesticate someone like that? How did we pull the stinger out of someone like that? A wild Christ indeed. Hello there and welcome to Jawbone. So, wild Christ. Was Christ wild? Is Christ wild? Well, I'd have a few thoughts about that, and the notion of wildness and quite what it is has been paramount in my consciousness for the last 30 years or so as a wilderness rites of passage guide and as a mythologist and storyteller and someone that actually lived out in the bush for 4 years in a tent on a succession of English hills. Yeah, I think Christ is pretty wild, but wild, not feral, wild, not savage. I said in my very first book, back when Noah was a boy, that wildness is the dance partner of discipline. And in actual fact, you can find a lot of discipline within wildness. So what would be wild about Jesus, eh? Where to begin? So it was early morning, wasn't it? And he was coming down from the Mount of Olives and he was starting to teach. And of course, the religious teachers of the day who had not taken to him by this point, they were trying to find a way of tripping him up in public. And they thought of something very clever. They brought a woman to him that had clearly committed adultery. Now, there are old mandates about this kind of thing, and she should have been stoned to death, apparently, according to the law of the day, the law of the ancients. And I always imagine of this, that there's a bit of a, there's an assembled group of people listening at this moment. They say, so Jesus, what do you think that we should do? Should we stone this woman or not? Now, this is very clever, because he is extremely popular by this point, and were he to just say, stone the girl, then he's going to lose a bit of the popular vote. There's a lack of heart in that. But on the other hand, if he says, don't stone her, well, he is, he's at odds with the teachings of the time. Now, while this goes going on, Jesus, Yeshua, is drawing in the dust. We don't quite know what he's up to, but he's got his finger in the dust and he seems sort of preoccupied slightly with some other world. But they keep at it. And then he says something that you'll no doubt know, but it always bears repeating. He says, okay, he takes the scene in and he says, kind of simple, let he who is without sin, they cast the first stone. They cast the first stone. And as I remember the story, everything kind of goes quiet. The process of thought erupts in people, conscience erupts in people. And I think it's the older guys at first who begin to leave and then the younger ones, until finally Jesus is still there, still focused on the dirt with the woman in front of him. And, he looks up at her and he says, look, just get out of here and change your way of living, sin no more. Now, there is an old folk tale that grew up in the early days of Christianity about what he was drawing in the dust. Some say that had you looked over his shoulder at that moment, he was drawing an audit of every single sin you had ever committed. And so, the assembled dignitaries wanting to befuddle him, they peer over at what he's doing and they see themselves writ large in the dust. They see their smallness, they see their unripeness, they see their wickedness. So that's a pretty wild thing to do. But I think Christ is wild, but he's also a lot of things. As I've said many times, you can't draw Jesus with one line, which is why he's so compelling. There's many a time I've wished he was a bit more like Francis of Assisi, or wished he was a bit more like John the Baptist. But he is who he is, and he weaves between the cities and the towns and the bush as he sees fit. He goes where he will. But here's just some of the wildness of Christ, and I am slightly paraphrasing, and I'm not going to apologize for it. So apparently, unless you are a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. Unless you are a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, that's a bit upsetting for someone like me who may fancy themselves as a bit of erudite and distinctly unchildlike. I've spent a lot of time and energy into not being like a child. Now, do understand that my interpretations, I'm deliberately just giving initial reactions to these things. There are deeper implications, especially if you know the Old Testament, that you're not initially going to be privy to. So your first hit of Jesus is usually actually really disorientating, and that settles as you move from encounter to wisdom. That usually underpins this. Although my friend Mark Vernon has said, and I think there's a genius in this, that he thinks a lot of Jesus's parables are not designed to make some easily digestible point. They are designed to disorientate. They are designed to spin you round like a dervish and open up a new and uncertain and shimmering world to you. So, unless you are a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. Hate that because I want to be wise and clever. But maybe it's wise and clever to be as a child. Whoever who loves life will lose it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep eternal life. Well, what does it mean? What does he mean, who loves life? I mean, I love life. I love conviviality, and I love my friends, and I love nature, and I love solitude, and I love the senses. I love the senses. I am a essential beastie. I'm a creaturely beastie. Well, I don't think that Jesus actually, and this is just my take, I don't think he's saying that these things are necessarily wrong, but when they are front and center, and that is all they are, and that is the temple of the senses that you are serving in, well, as William Blake says, you're never going to know when you've had enough till you've had more than enough. So, stuff, you can enjoy it, you can play with it a bit, but don't make it the beginning and the end of things. Then, of course, we find out that he wants us all to be cannibals. He says, you have to eat the flesh of the Son of Man and you have to drink his blood. Or you have no life in you. Or you have no life in you. So this is why, the early pagans were momentarily... They were kind of frightened by the outlaw Christians because they said, these guys are more pagan than we are. Even we aren't eating our own God. And that is something that the early Christians were accused of. They're accused of, far from being these, these sort of, Anglican folks sitting there with their guitars kumbayaing their hearts out. They were seen as these blood, flesh-eating, solitude-loving, but also social, strange. I mean, how can you not love the senses when your central ceremony is a meal? So we've got to become cannibals as well as children. We've got to become little cannibal children. I'm teasing, of course. Blessed are you when people crap on you. There's another one that's the paraphrase. Blessed are you, when people slag you, when people disavow you, when people betray you. Is that not a world turned upside down? No one likes that experience. No one likes that. I don't like that experience. So, because everything life tells me is to assert and to defend and to fight back and to strike the villain on the jaw. I do not want to be offering the other cheek. I am pugilistic. I'm not pacifistic in that way. And then, of course, he is really specific. I am the way, the truth, and the life. That's wild. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I don't think he's hinting at some kind of generalism or universalism at that point. He's specific. The guy is either barking mad, and you should just never think of him again, or he's onto something. Don't gather up treasures on earth, but look for the treasures in heaven. Look for the treasures in heaven. You know, you see me, I'm busted. Look, there's 5,000 books alone in this one room, and I have others. I have gathered up many treasures of the earth and precious few treasures in heaven. You know, do you remember he says to the, my crew, Jesus, he says, my crew are the starving and the sick and the deranged and the wanderers. How you treat them is how you treat me. It's appalling. I don't treat those people like that. I skip by if I possibly can, or flick them a £1 coin. Hypocrite, hypocrite, hypocrite. That is what I am. And he's right, isn't he? I mean, following on from this, small is the gate and narrow that leads to life, and only a few find it. That's going to put the jitters up you, isn't it? Only a few find it. Not everybody. Not simply by being fleshy and having hands and opinions are we going to find that narrow gate. He is talking about, it's just occurring to me now actually, a phrase I've used endlessly. Christ is talking about making a covenant with limit. And in the eyes of the world these days, and the me firstness of everything, is that not wild? Is that not a radical countercultural move? Is Christianity not, through the mouth of this man, countercultural from start to finish? Good Lord. If the house is not worthy, withdraw your blessing of peace. If the house is not worthy, withdraw your blessing of peace. Discernment. Interesting, isn't it? On the one hand, we began with that little story about not judging. And on the other hand, he's kind of emphasizing a certain discernment, dust yourself down and move on. Christ uses what I would call a blue feather language. And a blue feather language is this. If you look at a magpie, it looks black or white. It's this way or that way. And I often find through the parables and through Jesus's responses for being questioned, he's nothing if not cryptic. He always takes me somewhere in my mind I wasn't expecting to go. And the analogy of the blue feather is, if you look at a magpie, it looks black or white, but there'll be a blue feather hidden somewhere in it if you pay close attention. And Christianity for me is a blue feathered way of living in the world. He is the strangest of the gods for me. As someone that's spent 30 years now exploring and loving the rich tapestry of myth, why on earth would I have pitched my flag with the seemingly least sexy, most mundane, most damaged excuse for a mystery religion I could find? Well, I was wrong on all those counts. I was wrong on all of them. Just to summarize something I've said many times before, we are dealing with someone that was born a fugitive, dies an outlaw, confuses, confounds, and often hurts in some deep spiritual awakening form of way almost everybody that he met. He affected everybody that he met. And then he has the audacity of coming back. What kind of devilment got into the petri dish of Western consciousness that we managed to domesticate someone like that? How did we pull the stinger out of someone like that? A wild Christ indeed. But again, I finish this by saying, when I use the word wild, I'll probably make more associative videos like this actually. When I say the word wild, I don't just mean interpretive dance. I don't just mean lack of boundaries. I don't just mean what C.S. Lewis called Christianity with water. Not at all. I'm talking about vigilant, philosophical, emotional diligence, due diligence to what Jesus actually had to say and did. Oh, ho, 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 ho.